Welcome and good afternoon, everyone, to our Friday afternoon webinar with our new software. Can you hear me, Diana? No?
Diana can't hear us. That's interesting.
Diana can't hear us. You can obviously hear me, Jim.
I've got you, mate.
Diana. Well done. Okay. I can't hear you. I'm sorry, Diana, but that's all right. I'm guessing most others will work out the sound as we go along. Sorry for the new software. I know that's always painful. Tim identified that Teams may be a better solution for all the builders that have Zoom subscriptions, as it's part of the Microsoft suite of products. So Jim, you're on a test case webinar for us using new software. But
no problem.
Anyway, welcome. I've asked Jim to present to us this afternoon because Jim's historically been a leader in innovative slab design, and Jim and I have done a lot of business together over the years. And Shane's recently identified Jim's got a product that I think is going to be quite helpful to a lot of our builders, and that being the Biax system that we announced on Workplace. So I'd like, Jim, if you can just give us a little bit of history of how this product's come to market, why it's come to market, and why you think it's going to be a help to our builders. That'd be a great place to start.
Okay, sure. And if and when it's appropriate, I've got a very simple, very pictorial presentation I can run through. But for history, simply put, my history is in the reinforcing concreting foundation space for the last 20 odd years after a good stint at ARC for 10, where on my first day in the building industry, I was in a kindergarten in Blacktown picking up busted bits of polystyrene waffle pod. So this some sort of bizarre destiny that I didn't even realise. But my business partner owns a pretty. So
you weren't in kindergarten, Jim. You were at a kindergarten.
No, just to clarify, I may as well have been when it came to my work life, but certainly no, I didn't qualify to be a candidate.
You weren't just hanging around.
No, I wasn't just hanging around. I was. Yeah, yeah. I'll let you regulate the story, but yeah. Anyway, it was all very legitimate, but it was a very interesting inception in the building industry, and I'd forgotten about it honestly until about 2 months ago when someone reminded me. Sure. So my business partner has a concreting business in Queensland. We got together 11 years ago and formed a company just through a mutual contact for a product called Polyvoid, which was a way of creating a suspended foundation for residential houses that protected them from highly reactive soil. Integrity has done plenty of those. Integrity's original engineer was the guy that helped us pioneer that. That led us to establishing a screw piling company, which is called Katana Foundations, which I'm residing in at the moment. Katana's now 8 or 9 years old, and we operate across all eastern states, including Tassie, across to Adelaide, and now in New Zealand. And when we were in New Zealand, we came across what's known as X-Pod over there, which is Biax here in Australia. Simply put, it ticked boxes we haven't been able to tick with the other variation of non-polystyrene-based slab products. And for Brett, particularly having a large amount of concreting gangs, he could see.
So for everyone else, it ticked boxes that polystyrene pods are not able to tick. So
yeah. And furthermore, Glenn, it ticked boxes that we couldn't satisfy ourselves with as contractors with a bit of engineering now with products like Couplex as well.
Sure.
So we sort of tried and tested a lot of those ideas that have been around for a long time. We met the inventor. The inventor is an Italian fellow who is a structural engineer of significant qualification. He was residing in New Zealand. He married a Kiwi girl, and he has an engineering firm in Italy that builds nuclear power stations and stadiums and shopping malls. House slabs was absolute chook food for him, but he loved the idea of bringing the waffle pod broccoli boxes, I love to call it, and the attributes of a recycled plastic void together to create a better hybrid, if you like. So
Jim, at this point, do you want to put that on the screen so some of the builders maybe that aren't quite clear on what we're talking about might be able to visualise that?
Yeah, sure. Tim, I might need to ask for permission to share my screen, please, mate.
No worries, just sorting that out.
Thank you.
All right, give that a crack
Okay.
now.
All right. Sorry, I pressed the button, but it's just giving me a little spinning wheel at the moment.
Okay, just give it a second.
So, Jim, how many slabs are on the ground in Australia with this solution at the moment?
It's over 1,000.
Okay.
Pretty comfortable. It's over 1,000, mate. Yeah.
All right. And we're using Intrax as a national supplier. Intrax seem to be quite familiar with this solution. Is that someone you've worked with previously?
Yeah, we've worked with Intrax extensively through all the businesses we've had, and consequently, due to our relationship and their breadth of understanding of this space, we had Intrax do the third-party peer review for the design software that we were going to release or have released to the market. We needed to make sure that the building market and the engineering fraternity couldn't be cynical about an Italian engineer living in New Zealand issuing a software program to Australia. It doesn't add up.
Sure.
So Intrax did the structural review for us, and Coffee did the geotechnics. So Intrax's understanding of this is quite intimate.
Great.
And it's certainly leading the industry in telling clients about it too. I'm just going to see, has that shared the screen at all? Because it's just not.
I'm not seeing that there, but so you found the share content button. It's a little
Yeah,
square with the arrow.
I
Yep.
have, and I am Teams familiar, and it's not behaving the way I expect it. Normally you press it and it will give me the option to choose a window to share, but it's not.
We can cancel and try again.
Can you email it to Shane and maybe Shane can share it for you, or Tim?
Yeah, I'll do that right now. Bear with me. Feel free to ask a question, mate, while I do this. I'll do my best.
Sure. So let's talk key features and benefits.
Yeah, sure.
We're attracted to this as builders because it looks like it's a cheaper way to get a slab on the ground, particularly in H-class sites on the East Coast. But I'm interested in, from your point of view, is it just cost savings we're looking at? What's the motivation that you're hearing from builders? Are there other features and benefits that aren't immediately obvious other than cost savings?
Well, I want to address the cost part first, Glenn, because there are circumstances where it is absolutely a cost benefit, and there are circumstances where it may not be. And that context makes more sense as I just can quickly get this to Shane around the engineering factor. Here we go. Okay, Shane, you should have that any second, mate. Okay, send. I'll come back to the window. So, okay, with cost, the benefit of the Biax system, the way it works as a fully engineered unit, is that we have fewer variables typically from one building size and shape to the next, built on that soil type or that soil type. So in other words, we have a base system, if you like, that comprises of our pod height 215 with an 85mm cap. So it's a 300 overall slab all the time. So
all the time. Sure.
Key point number one, right up into your low E classes that you can get out at, Westdale there in Tamworth and other these areas. Even that 300 profile can work for up to those values, and the engineering software, which I'll give a bit of a brief about in a minute, does that work. So a base Biax slab will always be the 215 slab, 11mm 3-bar in your beam, 12mm bar in your rib, and 72 mesh on top.
Yep.
That reinforcing profile, unlike waffle pods where we've got to follow a recipe that tells us when you get to here you've got to use these pieces of Rio, because the Biax is designed bespoke every single time with our software, it is absolutely common for an H2 or an H2P slab to still use the same Rio that's in our M.
Sure.
So on that basis, that means that H2 will end up cheaper than your waffle alternative. But on your M, you've got more concrete because our rib centres are closer, and we're not getting those concessions of things like Rio details coming down. So there is a slight offset there.
So you're saying if you're looking at it purely from a cost perspective, which I'd suggest is the main motivation for the builders on this webinar, that they're going to be looking at a biax on H sites and pods on M sites. Is that, what you're saying?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. That's it. So my dialogue with builders is, okay, if your motivation is 100% every individual slab being no more than X amount, then bin the M's, because if you're doing pretty rudimentary M's, this is going to be 7 or 8% dearer.
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
And Shane, that bears out in the numbers you're looking at.
Yeah. Correct. Yep. Yeah, I mean, as you rightly pointed out, the ribs are closer together, and the shape of the pod means that the ribs are actually about 130 wide on average rather than 110. So, and then obviously, it's a more costly unit piece. If you're thinking about labour effect, though, if you had your own trades, your own concreter on wages, you were looking to install it yourself and just get a concreter in to finish it, then you would potentially find this product would just gazump the waffle exponentially, because it is so user friendly to install. I think I could install it, and I'm incompetent. So
yeah, you're right, Shane. It's Lego or IKEA, whatever you want to do, right? 16-year-olds, as long as they can read the start point and put the right shape in the right spot.
So you're not getting pushback from trades, Jim? No,
mate. The two hardest to click over normally are engineers and concreters, and we've won them both over.
Okay.
Yeah. So in terms of ticking boxes on the other benefit factors, Shane, what we might do, actually, I might just follow the process of the presentation. So those are the parts. If you just go back, these are the primary parts. We have a pod. We have 2 pods, in fact. This one here is the 215. We also have a 145 mil high for a 70 mil step down for a wet area, a patio, a garage, whatever it might be. On the left-hand side, you can see what we're calling adjustables, and the adjustable one clicks onto the pod itself and extends it by 400 mil. The adjustable 2 can take it from 400 out to 700, and then you're back to a full pod denomination. Those 2 parts will be changed in around March, where we introduce, we get rid of the adjustable one that clicks to the pod, and we'll have a dedicated moulded half pod, or about a third size pod. I won't get into the reasons why, but it will significantly change the experience on site for the concreter even more around the complexity of putting these together. It's still incredibly simple in this fashion, but we've made it even better. Okay. The white connector is in the center. We call that a keystone. The keystone has little prongs, and in the corner of every pod there is a hole. So when you lock that connector into all 4 holes, it pulls all the pods together. So your ribs are identical in size every single time, and it's all part of the proprietary method of keeping this whole thing locked together.
Yeah, great. That's perfect.
So during your pour, that's when we really make friends with a concreter and a pumpy, because nothing moves. We don't get pods floating. They don't blow out with the beam width. Everything stays where it should. Yeah. So that's the components. Shane, if you want to... Next page. We don't have to labour on this page. This is more just showing things like mesh lapping, but it's important to note little features such as the fact that the bar chairs are built into the pod. So there's another win for our labour.
Right.
The 215 pod on the bottom left-hand side, the chair is lower. It says 12 mil. It's about 14 mil. And this is a part where I've got to say to people, other than the fact that the Biax system has ribs in both directions, everything you know about waffle pods, where the mesh should sit and what mesh and bar you use, just leave it at the door. Okay, we're not designing to the same recipes. So in this case, the mesh is deliberately placed in the bottom of the slab profile. So structurally, it's still doing the job arguably better, but we get wins along the way with things such as your 4-way mesh lap, except when you might be using the smaller pod in a garage with 92 mesh. Might have a 4mm cover issue, but every other mesh type in every other circumstance, you don't have to cut the corners out, all that sort of stuff. So we'll go to the next. I'm just conscious of time, Glenn, so I'm trying to rip through it.
No, that's good. Thank you. We only want an overview.
That's cool. Look, this part is what we're currently doing for pipes. There's a pipe that's coming through in the rib. So if we've got a pipe in the rib, we need to leave space for an additional bar. We currently use the 2 adjustable pieces to make a mini pod. In March, it will be a dedicated moulded piece, much simpler. Next page. If a pipe lands in a pod, and on the right-hand side, it's very simple. Just mark it. like they should be doing neatly with a waffle, cut a hole, slide it over, bit of plastic and tape, and Bob's your uncle.
All right.
Okay. Now, those rib steel bars, they lock into the keystone as well. So if you have an exceptionally unique and diligent concreter that ties their rib steel, which not many do, they no longer have to. The keystone locks the bar in. You just get your 600 mil lap, and that's it. Everything stays where it should. So you can see there on the right-hand picture and in this picture here with the mesh on top, it's incredibly neat. Your beams are straight. It's an impressive thing to look at when it's done. Next page.
Looks like it'd be a lot more stable to walk on too for us bigger gentlemen.
Well, I did have a 142 kilogram Tongan the other day walk on a pod for the first time in 12 years, and by the end of it, he was skipping on them like a bloody lily pond. So he was having the time of his life.
What a picture.
Yeah, it was a hell of a mate. He made me hold his hand while he stepped onto it. He didn't believe me. So anyway, okay, this slide shows at the moment we've got this laminated, I call it a laminated cardboard that we use for forming up drop edge beams where you might get a particularly ugly cut, which just doesn't work with waffle pods either. You get that big cantilever effect, concrete gobbles up into the void. So I wanted a solution that meant that we could square up a beam like it's drawn, which is not. We're going to be looking to replace that cardboard with another plastic section now that I'm working with the plastic manufacturers for the product. But this cardboard has done the job really, really well. Just screws into the base of the pod, drops down into the beam. It's a very thick stuff. I don't know if you've ever been to a fruit market where you have the watermelons in the big cardboard bins. It's that stuff.
Yep.
So, you can push against that and you can't bend it. So it's certainly fit for purpose, but I wanted to try and get something a bit different. All right. Next page. Oh, well, that's just another image of it. Incidentally, that beam there is a good 500 mil inside that cardboard, so it was going to gobble up a lot of creep.
Oh yeah.
The next image is just showing that was a 170 square metre slab here in Sydney. You can see by the image there was nowhere that polystyrene would have been able to be stored on that site. The Rio guys had already pinched the real estate at the front, but that's a single cab 2-wheel drive ute. There's all the parts that you need for that. So Shane, we were talking earlier about the gentleman in Inverell. This is how we might be able to do that sort of thing. But that's just a case of seeing is believing, if you like.
What?
Yes.
Final.
I'm seeing lots of wins here, Jim.
Yeah.
It looks like a superior slab system, albeit maybe more costly on the S&M sites. Is there any drawbacks? What are the negatives?
Well, I'm a flashy sales guy at the end of the day, Glenn, so I'm going to say there's none. But honestly, we as a business, we had to invest a hell of a lot to bring this here and to continue it. And had anything of not ticked a box, we probably still wouldn't have gone ahead with it. There were absolutely barriers at the beginning. There was no 145 pod. There was no guide or aid for an engineer to design a Biax slab because they can't design it using the waffle pod software. Yeah, so we overcame those barriers over the last 2 or 3 years. So now drawbacks, I don't think there are any that are material enough to turn people off.
Distribution channels, we got that sorted?
Distribution channels is moving daily as the uptake increases. Another conversation I just had with Shane. In short, we are teaming up with all walks of life in different locations to make sure they can stock and store pods and distribute them however. And we are breaking from some of the traditional means of just going straight to a reinforcing supplier because they used to supply foam. They never used to stock the foam, and that was why we had to ship it around from everywhere to everywhere. So, I've got a fellow in Tamworth that does all of the Katana piles, and he's got a huge yard of forklift and trucks and said, mate, let me be your distributor. Now, I can give him the same buying power I would Bunnings or Mitre 10 or Osrio, so why wouldn't I support that? So,
look, we've just got 10 minutes left. Shane, can you give some observations from an estimator's point of view, what you're seeing in terms of the numbers?
I mean, it's still very much in its infancy. Obviously, we've only had one design now finalised, and it was only finalised earlier this week. In terms of the reinforcing components or the product that's being specified using their proprietary software, it's worlds apart. You know, a H2 site, you'd ordinarily be looking at either 3 loose N16s around the perimeter or double layer trench mesh with a 385 overall slab. So you're talking 300 high beams, an extra run of bricks all the way around the perimeter if you're doing, you know, to maintain that same 150 exposed slab edge. Potentially on the length of the slab, once it gets over 20 meters, you'd be looking at SL92 instead of SL82. You'd be looking at N16 in the ribs. And this,
all right, but a 250 square meter H2 slab, one's biax, one's pods. What sort of savings are we looking at?
If I had to guess, I would say probably 500 to 1,000, depending on freight. I mean, freight is the major variable. I mean, if you're in a metropolitan area where you're getting pods delivered for $10 each, like polystyrene pods with no freight component, then the savings on the reinforcing has to be huge to obviously, you know, offset the fact that there is no freight. However, in regional areas such as where I am or where, you know, Inverell is and the like, where we're paying $1,400 to $1,600 for freight just to get a pod delivery, and then paying $10 per pod. If we can get that freight down to $200 per house lot, you know, you're talking huge potential savings. But I feel like this product is very, very fit for purpose for our regional builders on challenge, like on reactive sites. Yeah, you know, pretty much, you know, kind of central coast and north.
Shane, can I just interject, because Glenn, there was one omission from the discussion about cost, which is really pertinent to your members, and conveniently or not, it is actually directly linked to piling or piering. So the way the design software works in the release we did last week, so the software's been used for a year. Intrax had it in place for a year, as others. Last week we released a new module where it now does the 3-dimensional finite element analysis, including a calculation for when you're piering. So if your members are often either partially piering around the perimeter of a slab or suspending it because they're on crappy soil, what the Biax system does deliver is a significant opportunity to space the piling out further and reduce piles. We prototyped it in Sydney with a builder with 20 designs, and on average their piling costs came down by 15 to 20%. Wow. So trying to scrap over $1 a square metre for pods and steel is out the window. They were saving $2,000 just on piering.
Okay. All right. Very good. So look, just to wrap things up, I guess, I'd like to open to questions. Tim, how are our attendees able to indicate they have a question?
They should have a hand system there as well.
Anyone able to make that work?
Yeah, so at the top, everyone should have a little set of symbols where they can raise their hand there.
It's a third one.
Yes. Okay, yep. Little symbols where you can also put a love heart and a thumbs up. Is that what you're talking about?
That's the one. I just put a love heart right through there.
Yeah, bring the loves.
That. Nice. Okay. Is
Chris Nell. All right. So we'll allow Chris to talk there.
I know Chris. I've met Chris before.
Chris?
He'll have to unmute himself, I think.
Yeah. I've allowed you to talk there, Chris. You may have to hit the unmute button yourself as well.
If all else fails, Chris, use the chat feature.
Shane, more than happy for you to distribute my email address to the team, and they can just send me emails and direct questions that I can reply to.
Yeah.
Maybe if you're CC'd on those, Shane, so you can collate the answers and then have.
I thought you were going to say so I could respond to them. I'm like, no.
You're across this now, mate.
Doesn't look like Chris has been able to join us. Jim, closing comments.
Look, closing comments. You're no longer considered a pioneer. We've got plenty of people who've had a good crack at it, so I don't want people to be fearful of being the guinea pig. We're well down the track across all states. We feel like we're established. Manufacturing capability is well beyond what we had a year ago, so there's no fear of running out like we've experienced in Melbourne and other states. But there's a bit to unpack to understand all of it. I'm happy to have one-on-ones with whoever needs it at any stage.
Yeah, very kind of. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. I for one can vouch for Jim's experience in the industry and his credibility in this space. So I encourage anyone that's got a site like what's been described today to consider using it. I know Charlie's had one designed in Melbourne that he's planning to do, and I guess Shane with Intrax, we've got the option to design a Biax system or an alternative and consider for a given site, which is the best way to go.
Shane, I would definitely reach out to Intrax now that you know that they have access to the new piling module.
Oh, I do know. I actually got an email from Tom the day he was going to the training session saying how excited he was to be learning about that.
Cool.
And I'm potentially going to go back to him and ask him to review that design they did earlier this week with respect to that now, given the whole slab is peered, and just, I guess, see what the outcomes are.
I think that's a good idea. Right.
So Shane, just put the Jim's slides onto Workplace for us this afternoon, and Jim's contact details there with them.
Yep. Perfect.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks everyone. Thanks for rushing back, Jim. Good to see you.
Mate. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, guys.